Welcome to The More Perfect Union, a podcast about the joy we get from American politics, or as we like to call it, real debate without the hate. Hello, I'm Kevin Kelton. I'm a moderate Democrat, and I live in Los Angeles, California.
I'm Helena Henry, an evangelical conservative from Colleyville, Texas.
I'm Greg Matuzak, a liberal Democrat from Cincinnati, Ohio.
I'm Cliff Dunn, a Republican from Newport News, Virginia.
And I'm Rebecca Kushmiter, another liberal Democrat in Kensington, Maryland.
And The More Perfect Union is one of the fastest growing podcasts on iTunes, certainly one of the fastest political podcasts. The More Perfect Union can also be found on YouTube, Facebook, and at our website, moreperfectunionpodcast.com, where you can also find host bios and commentary. So every week we put together a rundown, and we start on Monday building the rundown. And by Sunday, when we start to tape this show, we find that not only do we have 20 items on our list, but the things that happened on Monday seem like really old news. Greg?
Yeah, our rundown runs us over.
Not only that, but the first thing on our list this week was the firing or quitting, and I'm still unsure about that, of Communications Director Dubke. I think that's how you say his name, which we could talk a whole show about how to pronounce his name. And that seems like 1,000,000 years ago. And the point being is the pace of this Trump administration is exhausting. It just goes so fast. What do you guys feel?
Well, and some of it's also an accelerated news cycle, like, we'll be discussing London in a bit. That flew up in the last 2 days.
Yeah, but I think it's more than that. I think it's like one scandal after another. Someone was telling me all the scandals the Obama administration went through last year at this exact same time. Things like he wore a tan suit.
You can't just wear a tan suit.
You can't.
You really got to field test the tan suit. You need to put polls out there, find out.
He should have had Biden wear the tan suit.
Right? Yeah.
Well, it was a trial balloon for a white suit.
He was going for the Mr. Rourke.
Well, here's the thing. I think that this raises a real issue, which is, obviously a White House cannot control the world and they cannot control the news. But on some level, it is their responsibility to control the flow of bad news or news that creates scandals, because otherwise you just create this sense of chaos, which I know people say, well, that's Trump's management style, that's his leadership style, is to create chaos. I'm not sure that's the way a major nation works best. And right now you have a citizenry and you have a media and you have all of the political branches. They're bouncing around too much. And I don't think that that's a way that we can function as a nation.
But is it more than that? Is it that things are moving so fast that we're missing large issues? Because there's the next big thing.
Yes.
Horrible things are going on in this administration. EPA deregulations and pollutions and things that are going on to our school because of misspellings in tweets.
Right. Yes. Policy is taking a backseat to spectacle.
Right. And in 2 days, we're going to have, 6 hours from now, something else is going to be like, oh, well, look at this shiny object. And it's just so fast.
Well, and just, I'm the biggest news junkie there is. I've been up to my neck in the weeds of a lot of issues, some of the new regulatory stuff related to healthcare, some court decisions that have come down. I've been really reading heavily about those. And then last night, the terrorist attack in London happened. And I know we're going to talk more about that. But I found myself unable to take it in. And I've actually been offline very deliberately all day today and not knowing what all the developments were, because it's sometimes like drinking from a fire hose. And I'm not that thirsty, as it turns out.
I absolutely agree, Rebecca. And I think that the feeling is overload, that there's simply more than you can digest, more than you can process, and more than you can keep up with. And so it creates a desire to just sort of disengage from the entire spectacle for a period of time.
I will say that I think that you've hit on this being actually a strategy of, ensuring that there's an overload out there so people do tune out some of the policy stuff. Now, that being said, I will say that the media has arguably been complicit in the fact that they keep covering all these little things rather than saying, no, something little came up. We're going to completely ignore that for a few days.
How much of that is also driven by social media? In other words, how can the media control the message when people are generating their own news cycles?
Well, there is that, and there's also the fact that you don't know what's coming next. I mean, you're like, okay, Kathy Griffin, this is a big story. Bill Maher, this is a big story. The Paris Accords, this is huge. We need to talk about this to a point of overload, because you can't always predict what's coming next. I mean, we all spent the week sitting there going, oh my God, what does the Paris Accord mean for America's world standing and our relationship with Europe and so on and so forth? And then the London attack happens, and suddenly we have a whole news story with a great deal of substance, and Trump still has his Twitter account, and he's still using it badly, and he's actually spelling words that we understand this time, and that becomes its own story. So the media, they could try backing off, but they don't know what's coming next, and is this the big story, or is there another one coming? I mean, it's just, there's so much uncertainty.
I think some of it is self-inflicted, though, Rebecca, because things like Kathy Griffin, like Bill Maher, they're not actually stories, right? Nothing happened.
I agree.
It's fabricated, and the media, to some extent, has a responsibility to curate what it is that they want to discuss and to put forth to the American people things that actually should be a topic of conversation. We can get to it later, but I'm not convinced that Kathy and Bill Maher fall under that umbrella.
I want to build on Helena's thought because, and this is a little bit of a metaphor, but you know how in Amadeus they talked about it's not necessarily the notes, but the space between the notes. I think we're losing the space between the notes. I think we're filling it with crap. And I couldn't agree more with you. Kathy Griffin and Bill Maher were not news stories, but they became news stories because the public wanted to get involved in, again, the theatrics, tarring people and we're going to make Kathy Griffin pay, and Bill Maher is a racist, and HBO should have done this. And it fills the discussion, it fills the national dialogue with empty calories. And I think it's taking away from the real issues of the day.
Absolutely. But I think something that's interesting to note is it's not new, and it's not really specific to news. There's something that's happened in our society with the rise of social media and technology that has fueled this outrage mob mentality. And it's, if we remember back to Justine Sacco, I don't know if anyone knows who she is, but she, I think, worked in PR. Justine Sacco, she worked
the lady on the airplane.
Yes. Has Justine landed yet? Yeah.
Yes.
So very briefly, this was a woman who worked in PR for some big company. I can't remember who. She tweeted an offensive joke about AIDS, something to the effect of going to South Africa, hope I don't get AIDS, just kidding, I'm white, and then put her phone on airplane mode. Over the course of her 11-hour journey, pretty much the entire world, or at least the Twitter world, watched this woman's career and life implode. And there's a series of stories and people who have gone through that. And I think that what Bill Maher and Kathy show, and we can get there, is why do we have this impulse to capitalize on missteps or things that people say or do that, yes, maybe are offensive, maybe are horrific, but there's a way to condemn them without destroying these people's lives.
Well, let's stay on this topic. I know we were going to talk about, we're here, yeah. So we'll call an audible here and start with the Griffin and the Bill Maher thing. What did everybody think about that? I'll go first. I'll say I did think that Kathy Griffin's joke was in bad taste. I thought her apology was sincere and couldn't have been more sweeping, and I think that should have been the end of it. And as far as Bill Maher goes, as a comedy writer, I think it was a perfectly acceptable joke. I don't think it was racist. I don't think he should have apologized for it. I know why he did, because in the current climate, if he hadn't apologized, this could have boiled over and he could have lost another show. But I do think that he bowed to public pressure, and I think we're setting a very bad precedent where people are apologizing constantly for things that they shouldn't have to apologize for.
So I generally agree, and I'm not a fan of constant apologies, and though I appreciate using market forces and advertisers to try and encourage or discourage certain behavior, I think it's problematic the extent to which we've gone policing speech. That being said, I'll say two things. We can disagree. I'll say them quickly. I think Kathy Griffin's apology was more embarrassing than the stunt she pulled in the first place. And just to lay out the rules for white people on the N-word, if you're not black, just don't say it. Just don't go there.
Oh, I disagree. I'm sorry. You know, who are you or I or anyone else to tell comedians what's fair game and what's not? And you know what? This thing with the N-word, this has been bothering me for a while. The word is nigger. It's a horrible word. I hate it. I hate it as much as the C word. I hate it as much as any vile word. But it's just a word. And we're giving it too much power. He was making a reference to something that was historical. He was not putting down blacks. It was a moment in an impromptu conversation. And this idea that he somehow did something racist is just absurd.
Well, it's not that it's overt racism. It's that, first of all, saying that phrase fails to appreciate and give due reverence and respect to the experiences of the actual African American people who were brought over, from West Africa, who were enslaved, who were shackled, and who lived either in a house or worked in a field. I did not get the impression from watching Bill Maher in that moment that he used that phrase with an understanding and appreciation for history. And the second thing is, I just don't see why he couldn't say, I'm a house slave. There are so many other words, house Negro. There are so many other words that he could put there.
Because you're not a comedian. That's why. Because you don't know that house slave would not have gotten a laugh. Now, as it turned out, house nigger didn't get much of a laugh either. But that was the appropriate joke. And by the way, it'd be one thing if the black community and the black culture had excised this word from their culture. But they haven't. Okay? So to say that white people can't say it, but blacks can put it throughout rap music, throughout their entire culture, is a double standard that, frankly, I don't understand. Now, the people are going to start writing in and start calling Kevin Kelton a racist. That's fine. They don't know me. This isn't about racism. It's about giving one word too much power.
But words have power. Words have meaning, right? Words are how human beings communicate with one another. It's how we relay ideas. It's how we relay our feelings. And in terms of it being a double standard, it's not a double standard. There's some material immutable differences between people in the African American community and people who are not in the African American community. And when people in the African American community use that word, they are reclaiming for themselves and repurposing for themselves a term that, frankly, and again, I can't speak for all black people everywhere, but I don't think black people should be forced to share with others.
And of course, now I'm trying to envision how this would have played out if George Carlin had said it.
Yeah.
What?
I'm trying to envision how this would have played out if George Carlin had said it, just because he was able to get away with almost anything, partially because he was always so far out in partly because he was so audacious in what he would say. But whereas Bill Maher, I think it just doesn't play. He doesn't have the persona to pull it off.
Well, I could top you there. First of all, I agree with you, Cliff. I think that's a very good point. And I could kind of build on that and top you. It would have been different if Dennis Miller had said it. It would have been different if Trevor Noah had said it. It would have been different if Larry Wilmore had said it. They're coming down on Bill Maher because, frankly, that week they saw, oh man, it worked on Kathy Griffin. Now let's turn the same, laser focus of hate on the other liberal icon comedian, Bill Maher. This is all about politics. Bill Maher says a lot of stuff that's much worse than that. In the same show, he called the president, and gosh, I wish I had written it down, but he used a term for the president that is so offensive that it even kind of lit a little bit of a light for me, and I don't like the president. So we're really picking and choosing here.
Gilbert Gottfried lost a lot as far as he lost the Affleck duck job because he was making Twin Tower jokes in 2001. And they were in bad taste, obviously. And they were words. And he said, they're funny. And this is how I deal with these things, and I will not apologize for the jokes. So he lost a multi-million-dollar recording job that literally he walked into a studio every couple months and said, quack Affleck. And that was it. And he had to take the consequences for what he said. And this is the same thing with Bill Maher. He said something, and now he has to take the consequences when people did not agree. And there is an economic aspect to it, okay? Because he's in the entertainment issue.
But it's not consequences.
It's is consequences.
Piling on. Bill Maher is known to be an edgy, out there comedian who has said horrible things about a lot of people.
Yep.
Now, you don't like his stuff, don't watch his show. You really don't like it, don't support HBO. But this idea of censoring people and threatening their entire livelihoods, I mean, Helena, you're an attorney. What if you had to make an argument in a trial and you thought, oh, I think I found the appropriate way to discredit the plaintiff, but you took a tact that you thought would work and it blew up in your face, and you said, you know what, I made a huge mistake. I don't know what I was thinking. Should you lose your job and should you lose your license to practice law because of that?
It depends on what it is. Sometimes that's exactly what happens. But, the analogy doesn't really work, because if I am representing a client in a trial, first of all, there's a rules of professional ethics and conduct that govern what I'm supposed to do and impose certain duties that I have to that client. So there may be something that I say that is inartfully worded, but it's in the best interest of the client, or there's some overarching reason that I have to do it. But also, unless this is the trial of the century in open court, it's not something that is going to be the subject of a national conversation, and therefore the job consequences are different. The problem is there are people all over the country now who are reliving, I don't want to say the trauma of that word, because for me at least it's not that serious. But it dredges up a lot of pain and of history. I recall being...
Then it shouldn't be in rap music.
It's different. It's just different. There's a difference.
It's different because you define it differently.
Well, I can't speak for Black people everywhere. I'm not personally defining it, but there's a difference in a community coming together and saying we are going to take the devastation that's been wreaked upon us and we are going to repurpose it and use it as a term of endearment within our family. That's different. So it's not about it's in rap music. It's about our art and our culture. Taking the things that have happened to us and incorporating it into what we offer the world today.
My least favorite response to all of this was Ted Nugent's response, who in the past
Ted Nugent is my least favorite response to everything.
I know, but Ted Nugent, who publicly has called for the hanging and the killing of the President Obama, and said he would put a gun in his mouth and shoot him if he could, and so on, and said terrible things. Not only was he the first celebrity invited to the White House, but he recently just said, that Kathy Griffin just went way too far, and she should lose anything that happens to her. And he was just so pious and so like, oh my goodness.
But again, I don't think that people are really judging, social propriety by the standards of Ted Nugent. Okay, we know what he is.
You say that, though. You say that. But there are people, and I'm not saying, like, are good listeners, because anyone who listens to this show, well, they're, of course, above average and wonderful people. But there are people out there, and I'm not saying like that. I don't want to use the term basket of deplorables, because that's wrong. But I'm sure there are several people in a basket that are, deplorable.
But I'm now visualizing a Ted Nugent school of etiquette. And I feel like this is a real business opportunity for all of us.
Okay, well, now we've spent 20 minutes talking about Kathy Griffin, probably giving her and Bill Maher much more time than a show like ours really should. So let's move on to things that really affect the world, like the London terror attack, which happened yesterday. My God, how many is this now that have happened in London in the last couple of years? Ariana Grande, there was the other bridge attack. God, what else have they had there?
Too many.
Well,
that's the answer.
Yeah, and then there was the attack in Paris a few weeks ago before the election.
Right. Now, do you think that ISIS is trying to affect politics with these things?
Yes. I mean, the timing is, shall we say, too convenient to be coincidental.
Because it's right ahead of the election, right?
Yes. Now, what they are trying to do in particular with this election, I am not quite certain, but I think they are trying to muck about with the election and intimidate people ahead of it.
Greg, do you have any sense of who they're trying to promote or who they're trying to hurt?
Oh, I think that I don't know why they would want to try to get the Conservative Party in,
Is that Theresa May's party?
Yeah, they would try to get a Tory party in and thus make more issues and then have more people upset with immigrants and make their base more likely to join ISIS. Is correct, Cliff?
Well, yeah, you could also make a case that by having May stay in, presuming that was their objective. If their objective is to get May in, it would also be because she is committed to Brexit. And you could make a case that they would love nothing more than to see chaos in Europe. Now, you could also make the case that they're trying to make May look weak and trying to elect Corbyn, who would be a total basket case.
But Corbyn's awesome. Because what England
He's an
needs
awesome
right
basket
now,
case.
what England needs is a strong Labour Party to fix all this. But that we could discuss that at another time when we're not talking about this.
Well, yes, they need somebody who wants to nationalize everything in sight.
That's, like I said, a strong Labour Party.
Yeah, the other thing coming to America this week is the James Comey testimony on Thursday, and everybody is, so excited. What's he going to say? Who's he going to implicate? Will the Trump people be able to silence him before he goes in front of the microphones? What do you guys think? Is this a big brouhaha over very little, or is this actually going to be the testimony of the decade?
Well, considering that Comey has already met with Bob Mueller and he himself is a lawyer, I'm guessing that it's not going to be the testimony of the decade. I'm guessing there are some things that he will not be at liberty to say because they have material implications for the investigation. But I don't think he's going to be nice to the president, and that might be fun to watch.
So this is interesting because I hope you're right. But my concern is that Comey is so much of a James Comey that I think he's going to pull some punches. I think he's going to say, well, I thought maybe he might be saying that, but frankly, he could have been just suggesting that I go easy. I have a feeling that he's going to modulate and moderate his message to the point where it weakens the case against the Trump administration.
Well, Kevin, if we go by his past behavior, what he will do is he will muddle out a message, grumping about something, and then he will come back in 6 months and revise and extend his remarks.
Okay, fair enough.
So there's an old Dave Chappelle show episode where someone is testifying and he just keeps saying, I plead the fifth, F-I-T-H, fifth, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, fifth. And I kind of hope that's what Comey does. Every question they ask, he just says, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and just keeps saying that over and over just to upset everybody and becomes the most hated person by the Democrats and Republicans.
Well, what he should do is every time he should bring out a nice bottle of scotch, and every time he's going to take a fifth, he takes one from the fifth.
That would be great. but really, what's the worst? What's the worst thing he could say? Really, what's the worst thing he could say? Like, here's the recording, or I actually knew that I have pictures of Trump and Putin in bed. No, what is the worst thing that he could say?
The worst thing he could say is, based on my conversations, I believe the president was trying to slow down or otherwise impede the investigation into Michael Flynn and into Russia. That's the worst thing he could say, and that would be pretty devastating.
By appending the words "I believe" onto it,
yeah, exactly.
By making it an opinion statement and not being, able to provide evidence, the White House can jump all over that.
Well, of course they're going to jump all over it, but it's the court of public opinion that will determine whether or not this president gets impeached or not.
Well, but I don't think that plausible deniability is what Comey's going to be going for.
No, that's not what he's going for. It's what Trump's going for.
No, I know, but he's not going to say anything that leaves the White House an opportunity for plausible deniability.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I hope you're right.
The other thing is, if he does say what you're talking about, you know what's going to happen? It's going to hit along polarized party lines like everything else is these days. Republicans will say he's being a jerk. Democrats will jump up and go, rah, 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 we knew it. And things will continue as they have been for the last few months.
Yeah.
Well, my sense is that the fever is starting to break. I think Trump's base is weaker than people think. I know, I read the same articles as you do. that, they're going to stick with him no matter what. They elected a guy to turn this country upside down, and they like what he's doing, and they like that he pulled out of the Paris Climate Accords. But frankly, he's at 42% on a good day. He's at 37% on a bad day in the opinion polls. And I think when people start to realize that he does have something to hide and he's actively been trying to obstruct justice, I think that his base is going to start to pull away.
Nope.
Okay.
You know what? I being in Southwest Ohio, I'm surrounded by his base, and I'm just amazed that when I'll say things like, "It's amazing how bad he is," then they'll say, "Well, have you seen the employment numbers? Have you seen what he's done?" And I'll like, "What are you talking about?" "Well, he's dropped. The unemployment is great now." And I was like, "You mean what Obama did?" And they're like, "No, Obama just made employment worse. And those weren't real numbers. Obviously, those were lies." They believe that. They believe.
Because Sean Spicer came out and made a crack about that in the first month of the administration. Sean Spicer went out and he said, "Yeah, the president wanted me to tell you guys, ha, 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 that the numbers were fake and now they're real." And people run with that. I know it was just, Spicer bullshitting with the press corps, but people believe that crap.
And that 37% are not going to change.
No, I disagree, Greg. I'm telling you something. He has some floor, and I don't know whether it's 32 or 25, okay?
I've heard that the floor is 28, that on either side of the bell curve, there is 28% who are removable from their party.
Okay, so let's say it's 28, let's say it's 30%. Obviously, he's going to keep those people. Nixon lost the presidency when he hit 27%. So no, I didn't mean that the entire base is going to melt away.
No,
I meant he's going to go from 37 to 32, and that slip is going to be significant because he's already going from incredibly weak. Those people are not enough to sustain a presidency. They're not enough to sustain the House in 2018.
Right, but look at can you guys name one major issue? Name one major issue that he hasn't changed or shifted from his campaign. I mean, he doesn't even say radical Islam since his trip. I mean, he did love sonnets in the Middle East while he was in Saudi to the religion of Muslims. He was like, "Oh, our great Muslim friends." He never said radical Islam. What's up with that? And his base was like, "Oh, that was pretty smart of him. He's taking hundreds of millions of dollars for his daughter's foundation, okay, in exchange for weapons deals." And they're like, that's a good deal.
Deals.
He's a smart, deals, plural. He's a smart businessman." And they're like, what? They're shocked. No one is batting an eye.
Again, but that's the 28%.
Kevin, I would also like to jump in here and point out that what you're saying about Nixon and so forth, okay, I wasn't there. I was not born for well over a decade after that, but I get the distinct impression that time was, at least along partisan lines, far less polarized. You had a huge amount of ticket splitting that was still going on back then. In fact, that was the peak of it. So I think you had a lot of people who bailed on Nixon in the 70s who would stick with Trump come hell or high water now. I think that's one thing you do legitimately underestimate.
Well, I lived it, so I'm not sure that's true.
Well, I mean, the other thing let's not forget, Nixon committed a B&E. That's a legitimate crime that everyone agrees is wrong. You cannot break into offices and steal things. And Trump hasn't had anything that clearly objectively wrong yet.
Well, let me be. Boy, I'm the contrarian in every discussion we have today. So let me be consistent.
Sure,
no, I disagree. Someone broke into John Podesta's emails, the DNC's emails. That is illegal, and they published them. Okay, somebody.
But we don't know that it was Trump.
Hold on a second. Let me finish. We didn't know that it was that the plumbers were attached to the White House in 1972-73. We don't know yet that it's Trump. But make no mistake, a law was broken. Okay, a law was broken, and it was used to affect the outcome of the presidential election. And people can debate forever whether it actually worked or whether Trump would have won anyways. But do not mistake something. A law was broken. In that regard, it is very similar to what happened in Watergate. They went into the other side's private files to get dirt, and in doing so broke the law.
Well, but there's one difference, and that is that you would have, I would think you would have a number of Trump supporters make the case that this was more in the lines of the Pentagon Papers of there's a public interest reason that this stuff needed to become public, blah, 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 blah. And there was no such defense that could even be, hope to be launched with Watergate. Now, I'm not saying that's legitimate.
So what are you saying? There was a public interest in going to John Podesta's emails?
Yeah, actually, that's what
there was
they
a
will
public
say.
interest in going into the DNC emails?
That is what they will
That's
say,
what they
especially
are
considering
saying.
the stuff
Watergate, they
surrounding
broke
Bernie.
into the DNC headquarters. No, Cliff.
That is what they are saying. That is what they have been saying basically since the whole thing broke. Look at Bernie's people who were so happy to see this stuff break that it vindicated them. Hallelujah. I'm not joking, Kevin.
Cliff, you're contradicting yourself. Both cases were about breaking into the DNC. Both cases.
Yes, but there was no intent in Nixon's case to publish anything.
The fact of the matter is that they did publish things. They published the Canuck letter that knocked Edmund Muskie out of the race. So you don't know the history, Cliff. You're a smart guy, but you didn't live it, and you don't know the history.
So the friends of mine that know that, yes, the DNC were broken in, they are absolutely fine with that. They are absolutely fine with this. But they were like, so let me get this straight. The DNC, all the DNC's truths were exposed. And that's what they're upset about. That the truth. And of course, these are the same people that get upset about the leaks. And I'm doing air quotes right now. The leaks in the Trump administration and all the truths that they go, that's treason. Okay. And they can't see the how those equivocate to the same.
Kevin, the Canuck letter was published 4 months before the Watergate break-in ever happened.
Yes, but Cliff, Watergate was about more than just the break-in. No, okay, you can laugh at it. Carl Bernstein and Bob Woodward would say the same thing. In fact, that's where I heard this idea. The Watergate case was about a systematic attempt by the White House to change the outcome of the presidential race in 1972, starting with who was going to get the nomination. And if you go back and find out what happened to Edmund Muskie, how they took this letter that besmirched his wife's reputation to the point where this man was on a rainy tarmac, people said, oh my God, we saw tears in his eyes, he's not presidential material. That all was the same thing. And you can make snide jokes all you want, Cliff. It's fine. I get it. There are people who are saying this stuff. You're right. But they're wrong. Because if you step back at a 10,000-foot level, the two cases are about one team, the Republican team, wanted to make sure that they win the election, so they broke into the DNC headquarters. In one case, it was with actual burglars, and in one case, it was with hackers. And they took that material and they intended to use it for nefarious purposes. In this case, they actually did. And again, history will have to decide through statistics and through polling and through other means whether it actually affected the election or it was just an attempt to affect the election. But we could play cutesy games all you like with, well, that was this and this was that, and there was a public interest to know what John Podesta said about Hillary Clinton behind her back. It's all silly. It's all nonsense. They're the same thing.
Yes, and Kevin, the problem is, do the bases on either side in respective cases, care one way or another? For the left, it's a stick to hit Trump with. For the right, who cares? I think you would have to at least acknowledge that there are a lot more people who are more than willing to dig in their heels for their guy. I put that in air quotes as well. But to stick it, there are a lot more people who are willing to dig in their heels for their guy now than there were in the 1970s.
Well, you know what? History, we haven't lived it all the way through yet. Time will tell. But I will tell you, having, and again, I hope I'm not being, I know I am being patronizing, and I apologize for it. I'm being patronizing. But
You're
I'm a
being
little
an
bit older
ageist,
than you,
but that's okay.
and I lived it. I'm telling you, Cliff, right up until June or July of 1974, Republicans were holding on to Nixon just as tightly. It was only in that last week or two, or maybe the last month or two, after the Supreme Court ruled that the tapes had to be heard and leaks of content of those tapes started to come out, that his support waned. And frankly, I think the same thing could happen in the Trump administration. But no, to think that Nixon did not have a very loyal base in the Republican Party that was with him. I lived it. I'm telling you, I was a McGovernite, and I was yelling at the top of my lungs about this, and people would be saying McGovern was never going to win. If Nixon had died in the streets in October, he still would have beaten McGovern. People were saying all of this stuff, and Nixon still had to give up the presidency.
That's fair. And of course, I will make the note that we are making a lot of presumptions about what might or might not be discovered. I think you'll agree with that, Kevin.
Right.
Yes.
Thank you. Yes, I do. And so with that, we have to wrap up this. I have been on my high horse this whole podcast, so I'm going to let Greg wrap up everything tonight.
Thank you. Thanks for listening, and please follow us on Twitter at the More Perfect Union Podcast, at Facebook, and on Facebook at facebook.com/More Perfect Union Podcast. And share our link on Facebook timeline so your friends can discover us at well. They will thank you, and they may send you gifts of, nice smelling things, t-shirts from concerts that they went to, and who knows, maybe political items that they've collected when they were young, like, vote for McGovern and old men yelling at clouds and stuff like that they can share on, and they won't make you feel young. And if you'd like to join in our political debate between shows, join us in our Facebook group, Open Fire Politics. We're all there, and we'd love to see you there too. I'm usually making the sassy comments.
I would like to end this podcast by sharing with the world the very important message of Kofifi.
I was going to say, we almost made it through without saying that.